Hey guys, I'm Logan with Losine Clockworks, and today we're going to talk about this type of clock called an anniversary clock or a 400-day clock. The idea behind that name being that you can wind it on the anniversary of the last time that you wound it. So you only wind it once a year. So if everything is working correctly and it's properly cared for, that is as often as you have to wind it. You might need to adjust the time and things throughout the year. They're not super accurate timepieces, so don't expect it to be spot on after a year, but relatively low maintenance as far as winding is concerned. So what we're going to talk about is how to move one of these safely without damaging anything, and then we'll talk about how to operate it. So first thing, if you're going to move this clock, you need to take the glass off and you need to take the pendulum off. And the pendulum is right here. We'll talk about how to do that specifically in a second. Now, even if you're moving this across the house, you need to take that pendulum off, take the glass off. So follow those steps no matter how far you're moving it. Whether you're driving it somewhere or just moving it from one counter to the, from one table to a counter or something like that. This pendulum needs to come off or you can do some serious damage. Now let me show you up close how I did that. And of course remember, anytime you're dealing with pretty brass like this, it loves your fingerprints. And I am not a detective, so I don't want to see your fingerprints, ever. I don't want to see my fingerprints or anybody else's. This is a beautiful clock. They're shiny. You can see everything, which is so cool. And that also means that you can see every single fingerprint inside. So best way to avoid any fingerprints is gloves or a microfiber cloth, paper towel, anything like that that'll keep your finger oils away from the brass. These are coated with a protective coating, but this clock is from 1949. And a lot of them tend to be from that era, 1940s, 50s. And so sometimes that coating isn't as effective as it once was. So it doesn't hurt to just take extra precaution to make sure you don't leave any fingerprints behind. So anyway, let's zoom in here and let's just see what's going on. So I'm gonna take this pendulum off, and all you gotta do is lift up on it real gently and then rock it backwards. And you see how this has a hook on it and a slot, and that slot goes around the square piece on this suspension spring right here. This thing is called a suspension spring. It's called a suspension spring because it suspends the pendulum. It hangs from that. Now that is about the size of a hair, so it's very delicate. It's made out of steel. If you bend it, it'll stay bent and it won't come unbent. And once it's bent, it won't work anymore. Your clock will stop running, or it will be incredibly inaccurate. So be very, very careful with the suspension spring. Every clock I get pretty much like this has a bent suspension spring. It's one of the reasons it won't work. So be careful. I don't want you to bend that, because if you do, you'll have to get it repaired, and that will be, that's not going to be free. It's going to cost some amount of money. It's not the most expensive repair in the world, but we want to avoid that if possible. So, like I said, be careful. And all you got to do, you don't have to grab that suspension spring or anything. All you got to do is just lift up real gently. Just enough so that that hook comes free, and then rock it back. And see how I've got it rocked at an angle like this. You want it to come out at an angle. Now, installing the pendulum is reverse order. And if you notice, this one's missing it. It's got a hole right here, but normally there's a little cup down at the bottom. And the point on the bottom of this pendulum goes into that cup. And when your clock is level, the point of that pendulum should be right in the middle of that cup. And that's important. So let's talk about putting this pendulum back on. Take the point, and you want to kind of stab it into the cup, which you have to use your imagination in this case because it's not there. But poke it into the cup, and then just very gently slide that on like that. Now when you set it on your mantle or wherever it's going to be, you want to check and make sure that point goes right down in the middle of the circle, because that tells you the clock is level. And you might need to shim it. Some of them have these little adjustable feet. You can spin them to adjust the angle. It'll have 3 of them, so you can rock it any which way. A lot of them don't, so you just need to use some type of shim, a piece of paper, a piece of cardboard, whatever it needs to get that nice and level, and then you're good to go. So, as we're talking about transporting, we've talked about how to remove the pendulum. So we've got that out now. Take this, bundle it up in a towel or something like that, and set it somewhere safe. This piece of glass you don't need to take to a repairman. So if you're taking it in for repairs, just leave this at home. No point in taking any chances at it getting broken in transit. But if you do need to transport it, just wrap it up like a piece of glass normally would be. And then the last thing we need to do here for transportation is to secure that suspension spring. We don't want that bouncing around like this. And to do that, most of them will have some type of retainer here. So this one is round, sometimes they're square, but there'll be a little nut that you can loosen, and then you can just slide it down ever so gently. And of course, be very, very careful. You don't have to force it down. Slide it down until it grabs onto that suspension spring, which I'm going to do off camera because it takes two hands. Okay, there we go. Now you can see there's some little teeth or forks on either side of that pin. It's got it nice and secure. It's not going anywhere. It won't bounce or rattle. Now at this point, this thing is pretty durable. You can turn it on its face, on its back, on its side, wherever it needs to go. The only thing you got to be real careful of is these hands. You don't want to snag them on something. So be careful of those, but now you can wrap this up with a towel or put it in a cardboard box, lay it down, anything like that. As long as you don't go, breaking off anything that's delicate or grabbing those hands, you should be fine. There's nothing as far as the clock internals are concerned that will be an issue. Okay, so now you know how to move it. So everything's wrapped up at this point. Now you need to get it operating wherever you're going to have it. And so let's talk about that. So of course, first thing is we need to free up that suspension spring by removing this retainer. We're going to slide it back up and then tighten that nut back down. And then we're going to put the pendulum in. Like we've already talked about, angle it, poke it into the cup, and then just hook it on. And of course, like I've already mentioned, make sure it's level. That is that pointy part of the pendulum is in the middle of the cup. And then all you gotta do is first you should wind it once a year, of course. So there's only one way it'll turn. So let's see, this way feels real firm. This way has a little bit of spring, so that's the direction that I'd go. Wind it until you feel it come to an abrupt stop. So you feel like tight, 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 and then stop right there. That'll be just fine. And then give the pendulum about a 90-degree turn or so, and let it go. And it'll start spinning. To set the time, you can turn you can turn the minute hand either way, forward or backwards. Of course, never touch the hour hand on most clocks. So you turn it forward or backwards. And sometimes you'll hear, it's called a flutter. Let's see if I can get it to do it here. Yeah, there we go. Sometimes you hear a flutter. And so as you're turning the hand, if you're watching there, you'll see that thing bouncing back and forth. It's not a big problem. It's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. But just to kind of keep that from bouncing around too much, you can hold a finger on that rod that was moving and just turn the hand either direction. And that'll just help to make sure it's not hitting those teeth unnecessarily fast. So again, set the minute hand forward or backwards, whichever way is most convenient for you, and you're good to go. And that's about it. Pretty simple. The last thing you need to know is how to adjust the speed. So like I said, it's not going to be super accurate. So you find it tends to be a little too fast or a little too slow. It's saying it's 5:05 when it's actually 5 o'clock. You need to slow it down. And there is an adjustment knob on this pendulum. And this pendulum, of course, is not a swinging pendulum, it's a spinning pendulum. And so the physics behind it is like a ballerina who's spinning. If the arms are out, it's a slow spin, arms in, faster spin. So if you move the weights out, it'll go slower, move them in, it'll go faster. And the way that's done is with this adjustment knob. So it's got arrows on it, and it's got an F and an S for fast and slow. So if you turn it in the direction of the arrow pointing to the F, it'll go faster and vice versa. And it doesn't take much. Just a little bit of a turn will do quite a bit. This one actually has little tick marks on it around the outside. It's got 16, I think. So each one of those is a 16th of a turn. And one of those tick marks will change quite a bit. So just give it a little turn, and then watch it for a while and see if that helped, and if not, keep going. But again, don't overdo it, because it's easy to go too far on these. But that's about it. Real pretty clocks, really neat to have and to watch. And I hope this helps you guys know how to operate and take good care of your clock so that it lasts you for many years to come. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.